10 years. That's how long we've been camped on this beach, close enough to Troy's walls to hear their dogs bark at night, never once close enough to end it. It started over a woman, Helen, Menelaus's wife, taken or run off with a Trojan prince named Paris, depending which side of the fire you ask. 10 years is a strange price for one woman's name, and half the men on this beach stopped believing that's really what we're fighting for around year 3. We fight anyway. That's what 10 years does to a reason. It stops mattering, and the fighting keeps going regardless. Achilles is dead. Best of us, all of us would have said once, and now he's ash in an urn, and his son's out here instead, younger than half the men he commands and trying not to show what that costs him. Hector's dead too, Troy's best, dragged behind a chariot in front of his own father on the walls. Ajax is dead. Not in battle, by his own hand, after a quarrel over armor that should never have mattered as much as it did. This war has taken the best men on both sides, and it isn't finished. That's the part that finally breaks something in most of us. Not the dying, the fact that all that dying hasn't ended it. Odysseus has been hammering for 6 days straight. I watch him from the tree line, this ordinary carpenter nobody back home would have looked at twice, building something with his own hands that's supposed to end 10 years of war in one night. The ribs go up first, pine planking bent and lashed, and for 2 days it just looks like the skeleton of a ship somebody forgot to finish. By the 4th day, it has a head, a neck, something that could pass for a horse if you don't look too close, and from the walls of Troy, half a mile off, nobody's going to look close. Athena's sacred animal, or close enough to it. That part of the lie is deliberate, built into the wood itself before anyone said a word to the Trojans. I ask Odysseus straight out if this is really going to work. He doesn't answer the question. He asks me if I can stay still and quiet for longer than I've ever stayed still and quiet in my life. That's not a yes. I go anyway. The belly of that horse is smaller than it looks from outside. 20-some of us packed into a space built for cargo, not men. Knees against another man's back, someone's elbow in my ribs the whole first hour before we work out how to fold ourselves smaller. It smells like fresh-cut pine and pitch, and underneath that, fierce sweat that isn't just mine. Menelaus goes in near the front, closest to the hatch, and I understand without anyone saying it that he means to be first out. 10 years he's waited to find out if his wife left willingly or was taken. And tonight, he finally gets an answer either way. Diomedes settles in beside him, calm the way a man gets calm right before the part he's actually good at. Neoptolemus is younger than nearly all of us, Achilles' son, trying to hold his shoulders the exact way his father used to, and none of us say anything about how well or badly it's working. Machaon's beside me, quiet, the way a healer gets quiet before he's the one who needs healing. Someone near the front, I never see who, is praying under his breath, the same 6 words over and over. Nobody tells him to stop. Odysseus climbs in last and pulls the ladder up behind him. Then the hatch closes, and the light goes with it. And that's the last any of us sees of the sky for longer than any of us wants to think about. We hear it before we understand it. Feet running. Orders shouted too fast to catch whole words. Then the sound of a camp being struck. Ropes, timber, 1,000 small noises that only add up to one thing once you've heard it before. Ships going into the water. They're not sailing home. Everyone inside this horse knows that. They're pulling round the headland to Tenedos, out of sight, close enough to turn back the moment the signal comes. But the men on the walls of Troy don't know that, and that's the entire point. The camp goes quiet in a way it hasn't been quiet in 10 years. No cook fires, no drums, just wind and wood creaking around us, and 20 men trying to breathe without being heard doing it. Someone shifts his weight, and a joint in the timber groans, and every one of us goes rigid until it's clear nobody outside heard it either. Morning comes as a sound, not a light. We can't see any of it, only hear the walls of Troy waking up to something none of them expected. First, it's just voices, confused, calling back and forth along the ramparts. Then it's more voices, and then it's what sounds like half a city. And I understand before anyone inside the horse says it out loud. They've seen the empty beach. 10 years of siege, gone overnight. No tents, no ships. Just scorched ground, cold fire pits, and us. Someone outside, close, right up against the flank of the horse, says the Greeks have finally given up and sailed for home. Someone else laughs, the kind of laugh that's mostly relief with the fear still shaking underneath it. Footsteps circle us, more of them by the minute, a crowd gathering around something none of them have ever seen before. I hold still enough that I can feel my own pulse in my teeth. A spear hits the flank of the horse, hard enough that the whole frame shudders, and for one heartbeat I'm certain we've been found. It's not that. A man outside, Laocoon, priest of Poseidon, and I only learned the name later, is shouting that this thing is a trap, that no gift from a beaten enemy comes without a blade folded inside it, and to prove it, he's put a spear straight into the wood. It lands close enough to Machaon that neither of us breathes for a count of 10. A woman's voice cuts through the crowd next, sharper, more certain, and getting nowhere. Cassandra, someone outside calls her. And whatever she's shouting about ruin and fire, the crowd laughs her down the same way they laugh down everything she says. I don't know yet, crouched in the dark, that she's never once been wrong and never once been believed. That's the curse on her, apparently. Though I only hear the full shape of that story much later. I only know the crowd's mood is turning against Laocoon, too, calling him paranoid, ungrateful, worse. Then, and this part I hear rather than see, pieced together afterward from what men tell me later, something comes out of the sea for Laocoon and his 2 sons. Snakes, some say, or something dressed up as snakes in the telling since. Whatever it was, the crowd takes it as a sign the gods themselves are punishing him for striking the horse. Nobody speaks against dragging it into the city after that. There's a man out there working the crowd who isn't one of them. Sinon. Left behind on purpose, bound and beaten just enough to look real, telling anyone who'll listen that the Greeks meant to sacrifice him and he ran. That the horse is an offering to Athena built deliberately too large to fit through the gates, because if the Trojans manage to drag it inside anyway, the goddess's favor passes to them instead. It's a lie built entirely out of Trojan pride, and it works exactly because of that. I hear the argument happen in pieces through the wood. Someone wants to burn it where it stands. Someone else says burning a gift to a goddess invites exactly the ruin Sinon just warned against. The second argument wins. I hear stone come away from the wall itself, widened just enough for us to fit through. 10 years of siege, and in the end, they open their own defenses with their own hands. Ropes go taut somewhere above us, and the whole horse lurches forward hard enough that I brace both palms flat against the timber beside my head. It doesn't roll smooth. It jerks, drags, catches on something and lurches again. 20 men packed shoulder to shoulder inside, getting thrown against each other with every stop and start. Nobody allowed to make a sound about any of it. Through the gap in the planking near my shoulder, I catch a sliver of daylight, gone as fast as it came. And somewhere in that half-second, I see stone. The walls themselves, closer than they've been to any of us in 10 years of war. Close enough now that we're passing directly beneath them into the one city none of us has set foot inside since this started. Cheering starts somewhere ahead of us and spreads back through the whole column like fire finding dry grass. Flowers, someone tells me later. They threw flowers at it, garlands, the whole procession treated like a festival. I've never in my life wanted to hear something less. They tie us up in what sounds like the middle of the city itself, and for hours after that all we can do is listen. Music, drinking, somebody singing badly enough that even trapped in a wooden horse waiting to kill people, half of us want to laugh. 10 years of siege ends from where they're standing tonight, and they're not wrong to celebrate. That's the part nobody warns you about beforehand. It's not villains out there getting drunk on victory. It's mothers who haven't slept properly in a decade, finally sleeping. It's old men who buried sons on those walls, drinking to a peace those sons never got to see. It's children who've never once watched the city gates open in anything but fear, watching them open now in something else entirely. I don't think about that for very long. I can't afford to. But I think about it for a second, in the dark, and it stays with me longer than the fighting does. Neoptolemus, somewhere near the front of the horse, doesn't say a word through any of it. I wonder, not for the first time, what his father would have made of the son he left behind to finish this. Late in the night, footsteps circle the horse, slow, deliberate, someone walking the whole way around it more than once. Then a voice starts calling names. Not shouting, almost gentle, and the voice is doing something I don't understand until the third or fourth name. It's shifting, becoming a different woman's voice for each name called, and each voice is exactly right, exactly the wife or mother of the man being named. It's Helen. Somehow she knows or guesses or has simply decided to test the horse the way you'd test a door you don't trust. Whether out of loyalty to Troy by then or fear of what happens to her either way this ends, I don't know, and I don't think she fully knew either. Beside me, close enough that I feel him shift, my own breath catches on a voice that sounds precisely like my wife's, calling my name the way she used to call it up the stairs when I was slow coming to supper. Odysseus gets a hand over my mouth before the sound clears my throat. It isn't gentle. I go rigid, fighting it for one long second, wanting more than I've wanted almost anything in 10 years of war to answer that voice. And Odysseus doesn't let go until the footsteps outside have moved past, and the voice has stopped calling names altogether. Nobody inside that horse breathes normally again for a long while after. I don't tell anyone, then or for years after, how close I came. Some of them already know. Nobody says so. Somewhere past midnight, the sounds outside finally thin out. Laughter turning to snoring, torches burning low. The whole city finally, fully asleep, for the first time in 10 years. Epius works the hatch open by feel more than sight, and the hinge groans loud enough that every man inside freezes at once. Nothing moves outside. No alarm. Just the sound of a city sleeping. My legs have been folded under me for so long they don't work properly at first, pins and needles turning to real pain the moment I try to stand. And I climb down that ladder half numb, gripping it too hard, terrified of falling and making noise at the one moment noise costs everyone everything. Menelaus is first out, exactly like I knew he'd be. Someone lights a signal torch on the walls above the harbor. Out past the headland, at Tenedos, the fleet sees it and turns back toward shore. We move through streets I've only ever seen from the outside, past houses with families asleep behind unbarred doors, because why would anyone bar a door tonight? And I try not to think about that either. The main gate takes 4 of us to work the bar loose, and when it finally gives and swings open, what's on the other side isn't a city anymore. It's the whole Greek army, come back off the water, standing where the empty beach used to be. After that, it isn't a battle in any shape I recognize from 10 years of siege lines and formations. It's a city that went to sleep at peace, waking up to fire in every direction at once. I hear this one from 2 streets away, and never see it clearly. And I'm glad, if I'm honest, that I didn't. Cassandra's taken from the temple of Athena itself, dragged from the statue she'd wrapped her arms around for sanctuary, by a man named Ajax, a different Ajax, not the one who died before any of this. And history will spend a long time afterward arguing about how much worse that night got inside those temple walls. Whatever the truth of it, the goddess whose temple it was doesn't forgive the men who did it. Most of them find that out on the voyage home, in storms that feel less like weather and more like an answer. I don't know any of that yet, standing in a burning street. I only hear the scream, and I keep moving, because stopping to understand every single thing happening in that city tonight isn't a thing any of us can afford. Word reaches me after, not something I see myself. The old king, Priam, king of Troy for longer than most of us have been alive, killed at his own household altar. Neoptolemus does it, Achilles' son. And whatever else is true or exaggerated in how men tell that story afterward, the altar part isn't in question. A king who ruled through 40 years of peace before any of us arrived, dead on the one night everything he built stopped existing, at the hands of a boy who never once met the father he's spent this whole war trying to become. Somewhere in that same burning stretch of the city, a man named Aeneas carries his own father out on his shoulders, his son gripping his hand the whole way, cutting through streets that are no longer streets so much as fire, looking for something left to burn.
I don't see it happen. I hear about it after, the way you hear about anything that matters more than what was right in front of you at the time. Someone tells me, years later, that he made it out, made it all the way to a new coast, started something that outlasted every single one of us. I don't know if that part's true either. I know Troy needed at least one story that night that didn't end in ash, and that one's mine to believe if I want to. By the time the sun's fully up, the fires are still going, but there's nothing left in the city big enough to feed them for much longer. What's standing is mostly wall and column, black at the edges, and what isn't standing is everything that made this a place people lived instead of a place people used to live. 10 years I spent outside those walls. One night inside them, and it's the one night I still can't put down. Menelaus finds his wife alive in the wreckage, and whatever passes between them in that first hour is not something any of us ask about, then or ever. Most of the rest of us just start the work of getting home, and for more than a few of us that voyage takes longer and costs more than the 10 years of war that came before it. Odysseus alone spends another 10 years just finding his way back to his own front door. I built ships after this, sailed home eventually, the long way most of us did. And somewhere in every port I passed through, there was already a version of this story going around that didn't sound like what I remembered. Bigger, cleaner, more heroic than 20 scared men crammed into a wooden box, listening to a woman call our wives names in the dark, and praying we'd stay quiet enough to live. That's the part I want on record, if any of this gets written down. Not the horse, the waiting inside it.